afternoon, evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world and whenever you are watching this. Today's deep dive is into the drone strike at Leipzig Airport. There's going to be a lot to go into on this because literally it's one of them stories. The more you look into it and the more you read, it leaves more questions than answers. So sit back, relax, grab a coffee because this is probably going to be a long one. So first off, this story is from the 6th of August from the British newspaper The Guardian. I'm going to go through it so you're up to date if you aren't. Bear in mind this story is from when 3 days ago and numerous things have changed, but this gives basically the lay of the land as it happened. So what is seen as a catastrophe with multiple casualties, no shit, was possibly certainly narrowly averted by the discovery of a drone carrying explosives at Leipzig Airport. They examined whether a foreign state could be behind the plot. Up to now, Germany hasn't specifically pointed the finger at Russia, but as of right now, tentatively pointing towards Russia at the moment. One of the Ukrainian aircraft next to where the bomb drone was found was loaded with military ammunition, according to a classified police report quoted by the public broadcasters WDR and NDR and the Süddeutsche newspaper. Excuse any German listeners for my murdered pronunciation. The military ammunition, this has come from a classified police report according to The Guardian, although it has also been clarified by German Parliament that no munitions were on board and the plane was empty. Why a classified police report would say it was loaded with military ammunition and then the Parliament say it wasn't is anyone's guess. Potentially Parliament trying to dissolve any public worry. Interior Minister Alexander Dobrindt, who said on Wednesday Germany faced a new level of danger, said only an apparently ripped detonator had prevented the device going off near Ukrainian cargo planes on the tarmac at the shipping and military hub. The highly explosive Ukrainian cargo, complete with a tank filled with jet fuel, had apparently been transported from France to Leipzig shortly beforehand and was presumably intended for onward transport, the report said. The facility hosts a major cargo processing centre for DHL that employs hundreds of people around the clock. It is adjacent to two busy autobahn routes. I will get into that with a picture from Google Earth later in the video. The Bild newspaper reported that the drone found near the Ukrainian plane had a handmade remote detonator that did not work, and investigators hoped it could offer clues as to its origins and culprits. Leipzig Airport status as a NATO and German military logistics hub, as well as a base for the Ukraine's Antonov Airlines in Europe, has directed suspicion towards Russia. Again, I'll get into that in a bit more detail later in the video, which German and European authorities says has carried out repeated sabotage attacks. A quick one on that one. In 2024, I think, operatives operating on behalf of Russia were mailing parcels with firebombs inside, and I think one or more actually detonated inside the parcel centre at the DHL cargo hub at Leipzig. I think these were intended to actually ignite on the plane, but that actually failed because the plane was delayed. The German government and authorities have stopped short of pointing the finger at Moscow for what marked a clear escalation of the threat level in Europe, but Dobrindt said investigations were treating the incident as part of a professional hybrid threat scenario with a focus on foreign powers as likely perpetrators. Roderick Kaiserwetter, a member of the German Parliament Intelligence Committee, blamed Russia directly. I consider the threat to Germany posed by hybrid attacks orchestrated by Russia to be serious. I also believe that the attempted drone attack at Leipzig Airport was a targeted hybrid attack. In other words, an attempted act of terrorism orchestrated by Russia. Again, I'll go into this next bit into a bit more detail later in the video. An airport staff member discovered the drone shortly before midnight on Tuesday, hovering near the ground between two Antonov Airlines AN-124 cargo airplanes, among the world's biggest freighters. This next bit raised a particular eyebrow with me. Again, I'll go into it a bit more detail later in the video. Police said the drone defense sensor system at the airport, considered critical infrastructure by Germany, had not picked up the drone. They now believe, based on security footage, it had been on site for several hours before it was found. Dobrin told reporters that the drone seemed to have been modified to circumvent electronic detection. It was attached to a package of explosives roughly the size of a fist, according to the NDR Süddeutsche report. An investigator said the substance inside was believed to be Semtex. It has been confirmed that the substance was Semtex, a powerful plastic explosive. It's also been confirmed the size of the Semtex bomb was 800 gram. Again, I'll go into that a bit later. The discovery of the drone led the airport to suspend air traffic, forcing a DHL cargo plane from Marseille on its approach to take off again. It then collided with what is believed to have been a second drone. The media report said the plane had also been carrying unspecified dangerous goods before it made an emergency landing in Hanover, about 155 miles northwest, with minor damage. Again, another point to go into in a bit more detail later on. Bild said the drone that hit the DHL plane had a camera used to film the attack. Air traffic had been diverted on Wednesday from the airport's southern runway, but was back to normal on Thursday with no additional security measures reported. Ukraine has been using Leipzig Airport as an alternative location for the transport of military goods since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion in February 2022, according to official records. German Defense Ministry officials said its armed forces were not conducting military transport operations at the airport at the time of the incident. The airport has previously been targeted. A firebomb posted via DHL exploded at the facility in July 24, while a second was sent to the UK and caught fire at a warehouse in Birmingham. Two similar packages were also found in Poland. This does tie towards Russia. Again, Germany is used as the main transport hub for the Antonovs. The UK was one of the leaders in military aid to the Ukraine when the invasion first happened, and Poland has also had a big hand in helping the Ukraine in quite a few different ways since the start of the invasion. A subsequent pan-European investigation identified 22 suspects in Lithuania and Poland who were suspected of having been employed by Russian intelligence. Testimony this week at a trial in Lithuania of 5 people suspected of mailing the incendiary devices showed how narrowly the plane from Leipzig avoided being set on fire in mid-flight. A DHL company representative told the court the parcel ignited on the ground at its logistics centre at Leipzig Airport shortly before loading, rather than during the flight because the plane was delayed. So to start going into it in a bit more detail, I'm going to go back to the top and I'm going to glance through, and the bits that I think should raise particular eyebrows, I'll go into a bit more detail. So if I do go quiet, your sound hasn't gone, it's just me trying to get through the pieces. So the start of it, the start of the story, this isn't a possible narrowly avert. Possibly, this isn't possibly, this is certainly. The classified police report, I don't get why they would make it up that the plane was loaded with ammunition and then the Parliament turns around and says it wasn't. When you look at the Antonov AN-124, depending how much fuel it's carrying, the weight of the cargo it can carry varies between 120 to 150,000 kilos. Obviously, if it has a max fuel load, it can't carry max cargo load because it would infringe on its maximum takeoff weight. Either way, a bomb going off next to a plane like the Antonov, filled with ammunition and jet fuel, no matter what the quantities, would be absolutely disastrous. Given the Antonov was used to carry ammunition, you can guarantee it's not going to be carrying a couple of hundred or a couple of thousand kilos. You're going to be looking at thousands, tens of thousands, and it wouldn't surprise me if the airplane was full, given the cost it'd be to run this plane. Even if the Antonov was half filled with ammunition, whatever munitions it was, there's no best case scenario if this bomb went off. I'm going to show us some Google Earth picture of Leipzig Airport. Now, I don't know when this Google Earth photo was taken, but looking at this photo, there is numerous parts of the airport where the Antonov can be parked and processed. And no matter where the bomb, if it went off, there wouldn't really be a best case scenario. So on this part here, there's at least 3 Antonovs parked up. One here, here and here. Looking around here, it looks quite an industrious zone, and you've got the autobahn around here. If you go further up the airport, this is the more scarier situation. You have an Antonov parked here. When you zoom out of the picture, you have the main terminal of Leipzig Airport right here. A drone carrying 800 grams of Semtex going off next to an aeroplane the size of an Antonov, filled with munitions, whatever they may be, and jet fuel, going off here next to your main terminal. Transport routes, main transport routes. It's not going to end well. Again, there's no best case scenario. Again, when you look at Google Earth, there's also Antonovs parked here. Now, again, slightly further away from the airport, but by the looks of it, you have quite a big car park here, the main autobahn routes here, and rail routes here. You don't need to be a military expert or an expert on munitions to know that a payload of munitions going off in areas like this is not going to end well. Reading this part here, the only thing that stopped the drone going off wasn't actually the operator abandoning it, it was the fact the detonator was ripped or even faulty. Like I say, this couldn't have this wouldn't have ended well at all if this operation had have succeeded. Wherever that Antonov was parked, once that had gone off, that part of the airport would cease to exist. Firefighting efforts would have certainly been hindered, because you're not going to send a squadron of firefighters into a burning plane where ammunition is cooking off. Whatever munitions were on board, it wouldn't have been a single massive explosion all at once of the munitions. You'd have had your primary explosion from the bomb and the first part of the munitions going off. Heat from the fire. That would have cooked off further ammunition. Cooking off is when ammunition is in a fire or heated to a point where they automatically ignite and a cook basically set off. You've got an Antonov full of ammunition or whatever munitions is on there, cooking off. You're not going to send a squadron of firefighters in close proximity to that plane to put the fire out. You're going to have shrapnel, which would have affected past the airport, no doubt. You're going to have, with the explosions, you're going to have burning debris flying across the airport, so chances are fires would have been set away from the main explosion area. Given you've got the autobahns adjacent to the airport, they would have had to been shut down, so transport around the airport would have been ground to a halt. Either way, this wasn't just about making a statement, this was to cause maximum damage and casualties. There is no doubt about it. What really sets my alarm bells ringing, Leipzig Airport has a status as a NATO and German military logistics hub. Also, DHL has a massive cargo hub there. It's probably one of the biggest hubs in Europe and an arterial route for world cargo. What gets my alarm bells ringing? The drone was discovered shortly before midnight hovering near the ground. It now became apparent that it was spotted simply by chance by a bus driver who supposedly kicked it out of the air. And it had been on the site several hours, but looking at security footage, that's how they realised it had been on the site several hours before it was found. So, yes, modern drones now can be modified to circumvent electronic detection. However, if you have an airport that's designated a NATO and German military hub as well as a world arterial cargo route, why on earth would you not have the best drone detection security measures that is available at that time? Looking at it plainly, you could say, well, the drone detection malfunctioned or whatever. You could also look at it and say it was lapse in security, it just wasn't spotted, or by accident, or something a bit more foul play was at play, and yes, it was spotted, but it was willingly and purposely ignored. Possibility of insider knowledge, possibility of an inside job, who knows? Given the amount of people that work at Leipzig, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that insider knowledge was used. If this plane was carrying munitions, how did the drone operators know this? How did the drone operators know where the planes were parked? Yes, if you look on Google Earth, you can see pictures clearly of Antonov's park, but that picture will have probably changed 100 times from when it was taken to the day of the drone strike. It's a massive airport as well, so you're not the planes aren't going to be parked in the same place all the time. It's going to massively depend on what's at the airport, how busy the airport was at the time. So for me, I would say there's a definite risk of insider knowledge and perhaps even inside influence on this drone attack. The fact that a drone can circumvent security measures and be on site for several hours before it was spotted by chance should send a shiver down every airport spine in Europe. You know, this isn't no provincial airfield where it's used for pleasure flights by people just operating Cessnas and doing a few laps of the surrounding area in a Cessna on a sightseeing tour. This is a major military and NATO hub. You know, it's shown a massive, massive black hole in security. And given the Ukraine Antonovs are already there, they'd be a prize propaganda target for Russia. You know, the sensitive nature of the airport alone, given it being a NATO and German military hub, you know, this massive lapse in security, it would not surprise me if members of staff at Leipzig and even higher ups are suddenly made jobless in the coming days and weeks after this incident. Another one that raised eyebrows is the second plane at Leipzig, the second drone. This collided with a DHL cargo plane. The media said the plane had been carrying unspecified dangerous goods. Now, it's also been said since that there was no dangerous goods on board, but what actually was and what actually isn't is still up for debate. I did a little bit of a dive into dangerous air cargo. So dangerous goods are classed as any articles or substances capable of posing a risk to health, safety, property, or the environment when transported by air. There's 9 classes of dangerous goods, and none of them, if this drone had caused this plane to crash, would have had a good outcome. Your first class is explosives, so fireworks, ammunition, distress flares. Second is gases, so aerosols, camping gas, compressed oxygen cylinders, fire extinguishers. Class 3, flammable liquids, paints, fuels, thinners, and certain adhesives or alcohols. Then you have flammable solids for class 4, oxidizing substances and organic peroxides. Class 6 is toxic and infectious substances. 7, radioactive material. 8, corrosives, and 9, miscellaneous lithium-ion and metal batteries, dry ice, and magnetized materials. Now, none of them is a best-case scenario if that plane was brought down. If that plane was brought down, carrying any class of them goods would have caused a second disaster at Leipzig Airport and potentially outside the airport. Given the plane had to take off again, if that had have went over a residential area and that plane was brought down with dangerous goods, again, there's no best case scenario. Your probably best case scenario would be less casualties than you'd think. Barring that, not good in the slightest, to say the least. So when you look further down on the article, here, the DHL plane that was struck by a drone had a camera used to film the attack. So to me, whoever did this attack wanted the world to see their handiwork. You're not going to send a drone with a camera to a place like that because you don't want the world to see a statement. This was flying in tandem with the explosive drone, and you know they wanted the world to see what was happening. So this was about making a statement and causing as much damage and casualties as possible. So, yeah, not a possible narrowly averted, certainly narrowly averted, and it wasn't because the operators had a change of heart and decided to abandon mission. It was simply because the detonator broke. Now, who could be responsible for this? For me, you've got a few distinct classes on who could be responsible. You've got Russia itself, you've got people, organisations or private contractors acting on behalf of Russia. Not beyond the realms of possibilities, Ukraine itself is a false flag attack. People, contractors, cells acting on behalf of Ukraine, again as a false flag attack. Or you could have some random that's not affiliated with anyone who is a bit of an anarchist and wants to cause a statement. The random hobbyist that want to cause a statement, I would say that's immediately crossed off the list, because given it wasn't a homemade explosive, it was Semtex, it's going to be pretty hard to get hold of that if you're just a random everyday Joe, especially 800 grams. So for me, that can be knocked off the list, which leaves Russia and Ukraine, and it is not beyond the realms of possibilities. And before anyone with enough flags in their Twitter handles that rivals the United Nations, a German politician released this statement on August the 7th. SPD... Give me one moment. Adverts. Hate them. So, SPD MP Sebastian Fielder is demanding a strong response from the German government if it turns out Russia was behind the recent drone incident. Either it was Russia or someone wanted it to look like Russia was behind it. So for those with more flags of the United Nations in the Twitter handles, don't come after me for saying it's not beyond the realms of possibility for Ukraine to do something like this, because German MPs are also thinking it out loud and in public statements. If this MP then goes on to say, if Russia is behind it, it would have been an act of war. Fielder said the episode exposed a serious gap in Germany's national security. He said counter-drone measures have long been a priority for the federal interior minister and state interior ministers, but the airport incident shows the need to strengthen those capabilities. Absolutely no shit, Sebastian. Again, it goes back to what I said earlier. You've got a major NATO and German military hub. You've got a cargo hub, which is one of the biggest in Europe and the world arterial route. 2 drones getting on site for several hours, nearly blowing the place up. That is not, as he calls it, what was it he said? A serious gap? That's not a serious gap. That's a gaping black hole. Yeah, so like I also said, this should send a shiver down the spine of every airport in Europe and even further afield. It's becoming more and more apparent that the West is seriously lagging behind both in drone technology and drone defense. And given that warfare is heading at light speed towards drone warfare, being behind in the technology and in the defense of it isn't going to be a good thing. So yeah, not a great day for Leipzig Airport, and especially in German national security. There is literally no best case scenario for what would have happened if that device had gone off, and it was purely by luck that it didn't. When it came to the Lockerbie bomb, again, that was the explosion that blew up that plane was Semtex and only 400 grams. At 800 grams, that bomb alone would have caused serious damage, and then adding to that the resultant fire from the jet fuel and the cooking off of munitions, certainly a large part of Leipzig Airport would have ceased to exist had that device went off. It would have been the end of European cargo for the next few weeks, at the very least, if not months. Ukraine would have lost at least one of their heavy transport planes, and the consequences of this would have stretched far beyond the airport. You'd have the blast wave blowing out windows, you'd have of houses near the airport, the autobahn would have been shut down. There's no best case scenario, it's as simple as that. You'd be looking mass casualty and mass destruction. If this doesn't worry the higher ups at every airport in Europe and further afield, then something is drastically wrong. This isn't Leipzig's first rodeo. When we see here, fire bombs have exploded in the facility in 2024, in July 2024. So little over 2 years, and it seems that no lessons have been learned. While you could say, you can't open every parcel that goes into a transport hub, you could certainly scan them. The fact that now that threat has been levelled up to drones, and it took several hours before they've even been spotted. Lessons haven't been learned in Leipzig, and it was only last year that jobs were cut across all sectors in Leipzig Airport. So lessons haven't been learned, and by the looks of it, they're not going to be learned anytime soon. It seems that the only way lessons are going to be learned is if one of these attacks succeeds and causes mass damage, mass casualties, and then we'll be in a very, very different situation. Again, Germany's keeping quite tight-lipped about who has perpetrated this attack. There's tentative points towards Russia, but nothing definitive. When you're looking at it, fingers point to Russia. There's been no official statement from Ukraine about it as of yet. The only thing I've heard from Russia is that an embassy, I think in Italy, has said it's a new wave of anti-Russian hysteria. This doesn't bode well, and Leipzig Airport needs to seriously get its act together and invest in the drone defence security and security in general that it is obvious that is so very badly needed at this airport before an attack does succeed and causes major damage and casualties. I don't think we have anything else. By the looks of it, we've looked at most things. So yeah, a lot to unpack there and a lot to think about. Take care, and until the next one, goodbye.